And I remember the day I launched the paid tier, I think I got $2,000 in annual revenue signups, which was nothing. I was devastated. I thought, oh my gosh, I am so screwed. Like, even if I double it or triple it, it's not going to work. But by the end of 6 weeks, after I start writing more on individual companies and that gets traction, I think 6 weeks in, it was $100K in annual recurring revenue, which is enough for our young guy to live on. So it just really took off. And from there, it's been my only job ever since.
Let's go.
You can increase your luck surface area, and my next guest is going to teach you exactly how to do that. It is how he created his enviable life, where he is earning well over $500,000 a year, north of that, with unlimited time off, and he is only 26 years old. Welcome back to another episode of This Magic Life. I'm your host, Andrea Koppel. Before I introduce you to today's fabulous guest, I want to encourage you to subscribe to This Magic Life if you haven't already, here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if an episode really resonates with you or you feel like you've learned something new, please make sure to share it with your friends and family. This Magic Life is a true labor of love, and I want to make sure that I'm helping as many people as possible. Now, I am so excited to introduce you to Edwin Dorsey. Not simply because he is the 26-year-old rock star behind the Bear Cave newsletter, which is a hugely popular and lucrative Substack newsletter. And it's one that he started 4.5 years ago on a whim. But more importantly, I want you to meet him because it is how he got to where he is today. Because through his life, Edwin has actively worked to increase what he likes to call his luck surface area. And as a result, he has experienced some unbelievable serendipities and lucky breaks that have pulled him in directions he could never have predicted. We are going to talk about some of those experiences as a way to help all of you do the same thing in your lives. Edwin, welcome to This Magic Life.
Thank you so much for having me on This Magic Life. I'm so excited to be here. We're going to have a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Yes, we are. And I love your energy. I love your enthusiasm. I think it is one of many kind of secret qualities that you've used to attract some of those lucky breaks, which we're going to get into in a minute. But the first question that I want to ask you, Edwin, is whether you remember one of the first times that you would say you got really lucky back when you were a student, and what happened leading up to that lucky break.
Absolutely. I think one of the luckiest things in my life and career was as a freshman in college, meeting a former hedge fund manager named Mark Cahotes. And Mark Cahotes is known as somebody who's really good at exposing frauds, and he's passionate about doing it. And the way I met him my freshman year were a series of pretty lucky breaks. In high school, I was very interested in the stock market and passionate about finance. And my high school principal introduced me to somebody who was an investor 200 feet from our school. So I'd go to his office and meet with him and ask him a bunch of questions and just try to learn as much as I could. And we got along. And his son's roommate was in college and therefore maybe 4 or 5 years older than me and interested in short selling and exposing fraud. So he introduced me to his son's roommate. And I start talking to this guy's son's roommate, and we hit it off. And he knows the short world, and he starts teaching me. And he says, "Oh, when you go out to college on the West Coast, you should try to meet this guy named Mark Cahotes." So he gives me this guy, Mark Cahotes' phone number. And as a freshman, I just call him. And he doesn't want to talk to me at first. He just hangs up. He's like, "Who are you? I don't want to." Just hang up. And I
Yeah.
try to call him back, and maybe call him a third time because I figure he just doesn't know who I am, even though we should get together. And after asking a few times and saying, "Look, I really admire you. I think you're very, very smart. You're good at exposing these frauds and questionable companies. Could I please come meet with you? I'm happy to go up to your house or chicken farm where you live and try to meet." So he agrees to meet with me. I took a very expensive Uber, probably $150 Uber, hour and a
Wow.
half Uber from my college campus to meet with this guy, Mark Cahotes. And he's eccentric. He's wicked smart. He's good at exposing frauds. He's an eccentric guy. And I meet him, and he has pink Crocs on. And he starts asking me about the companies I'm looking at as a freshman. And obviously, I don't know everything, but he gets the sense I'm a little smart. And he starts teaching me the ropes, telling me stories, introducing me to people. And the thing that was so lucky about him isn't that he just became a mentor and taught me a lot, is he convinced me to make a Twitter account. And while I'm with him, the first time meeting him, he forces me to make a Twitter account. And he tweets, "Edwin Dorsey is going to be a factor one day. Everybody should go follow him." So I met this guy. I'm getting to meet someone I kind of idolized and was great at exposing frauds. He tweets at his big audience to go follow me. And now I'm a freshman in college. I know somebody in the industry, and I have about 1,000 Twitter followers who are just interested in me. And,
Wow.
ever since then, we would talk a lot while I was in college. We talk a lot on names, and that was a truly hugely lucky break. Meeting him, getting a start on social media, which became a big part of my life, and being able to start my newsletter, that was lucky, and it came through 2 or 3 random introductions. So that was a special moment early on.
Yeah, no doubt. So you said Mark hung up on you a few times when you tried to call him, which I can imagine. I can totally understand. You're like, who is this random person who's calling me? I'm a super important, super successful guy. You break through,
Yeah.
you get a meeting with him,
Hmm.
you pay for a super expensive Uber to go up to his chicken farm,
Yeah.
but it's what you did when you were there, I
Yeah.
think, Edwin, that really impressed him, because you didn't just go there and say, "Wow, you're somebody I admire," right? You had something that you were bringing to him.
Absolutely. I think successful people, they meet a lot of people in their life, and they meet a lot of young people who are trying to start their careers. If you want to differentiate yourself a bit, and one way you can differentiate yourself is be prepared and have something to say. So as a freshman, I was very interested in this company called Mallinckrodt. That what they did that was kind of sketchy is they bought a drug called Acthar, and they raised the price of this drug over the few years from $40 a vial to $40,000 a vial, a huge increase, very exploitative, and they were prescribing it a lot off label for unnecessary use cases. And I kind of felt that this is exactly the type of behavior the government's going to crack down on. A lot of their drug prescriptions were for nonsensical reasons, and the company's going to suffer as a result. With Mark, I would carry up around this red folder with all my notes on this company. I'd take it out and start presenting to him all the problems with this company. And he thought it was amusing, and right away kind of differentiated myself from what he'd expect for such a young person. And he got on the phone and called someone else who knew this company, and we started having a little debate about the merits of this company and the downsides. And I think that is when I earned his respect. And that's when he thought, okay, maybe Edwin Dorsey will have a little bit of an impact one day. So I'll support him. I'll tell everyone to follow him on Twitter, because I think sometimes people are happy to meet with you, but they don't want to open doors or tell their audience to follow you or really advocate for you unless they know you're going to be good. So showing that, and that's kind of a habit that I'd take to all my meetings throughout college, is I'd bring a folder. I'd try to have a lot of notes to prepare. If you show you put time in, people are going to be a lot more receptive to that. And I would almost never go into a meeting empty handed. I always wanted to have something, if they were open to discussing and hearing my ideas, being able to show them.
So we should probably back up just a teeny bit and
Yes.
explain why someone like Mark would be interested in hearing about a company that you thought was sketchy.
So Mark Cahotes, is a professional short seller. He used to run a $1 billion short only hedge fund called Rocker Partners. And short selling, for people who don't know, is just one way you can bet against a company. Most investors invest in a company and hope the stock goes up. Shorting is just the reverse. You're placing a bet against the company and you're betting it to do poorly in the future. And Mark was one of the leaders in this field. So he would be interested in what I had to short, because in theory, he could short it himself and maybe make money off the prediction I'm trying to make. At minimum, it gives him industry gossip. He's learning. It's something relevant to his field. So if I can do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work on one company and come to him and say, hey, this company's potentially bad, it's potentially profitable for him, it's interesting because it's really relevant to what he knows, and it's something he can take to other people and talk about. And it's just what he's passionate about, and you want to meet people where they're passionate. It's not just, if I came and I started talking about companies I thought that would do well, or my random hobbies, or bicycle riding, or something, I don't think it would have resonated. But he spent his career exposing bad companies. So if I come to him with the bad company, he'll be really interested.
Did you have any clue at that point, Edwin? Because we're going to get to the bear cave in a little bit. But did you have any inkling at that point that digging into companies that you thought might be poorly run, doing bad things, would become your profession?
Not really. In fact, I was from a really young age always passionate about stocks, and I was convinced I would be a hedge fund manager. I always wanted to be managing money and running a fund. So if you asked me at any point after second grade, I'd say, I'm running a hedge fund. I'm running a hedge fund. I'm going to be an investor. I'm going to be running a hedge fund. So I knew this was generally the field I wanted to be in. I had no idea that I would take the turn where instead of investing in companies, I'd be focused on exposing more corporate misconduct and exposing the bad actors. So I knew I'd want to be in this field. I definitely did not expect to go down this route, at least early on.
So let's follow the breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
All right. So, what would you say was the next milestone for you or pivotal moment that would fall into the category of a lucky break?
I would say there were two more big pivotal moments before I started the Bear Cave that really helped my career. The first was I got introduced to another hedge fund manager named Jim Carruthers, also my freshman year. He ran a $1 billion short only hedge fund called Sophos, which was 10 minutes from my college campus. And the way I got introduced to him is even more quirky. I, as a freshman, started writing online about this company, Mallinckrodt, and why I thought it was a bad investment and the bad things they were doing and their connection to shady doctors who were being banned from the industry. And I had an anonymous account that said I lived in Palo Alto, California. And I was sharing all these ideas on this company, but it wasn't clear who I was or how young I was. And this hedge fund manager of a $1 billion fund was reading my anonymous account and blog postings. And he reached out to me and he said, look, what you're saying is smart. I'd love to connect. Could you grab coffee with me? And I said, absolutely. So I go to grab coffee with him. And he was stunned that I was a student. He was like, I thought you were going to be a professor or an adult. I thought you were in your 40s. But no, I was just an 18-year-old kid. And I, and I think right away that made a good impression. It's like, wow, he's reading my blog anonymously and is willing to meet. And he was pretty impressed. So he had me meet with other people in his fund, and I met with everybody on the team. And he offered me a very generous internship. So on and off for all 4 years of college after that meeting, I became a paid intern for this hedge fund. And that opened up so many doors. That taught me the rope. It taught me industry practices. It taught me how to dig. It showed me the exciting moments that short selling and digging into companies can have. That was the biggest lucky break of all. He was the best boss. I earned a lot of money, so I was able to save a lot all 4 years of college because your expenses aren't big, which led to me being able to launch a newsletter with some savings. It was meeting him was completely lucky, and it would have never happened if he just didn't stumble across my obscure blog and see that I was in the same town as him.
Yeah. How did he find the blog?
So there was a website called Seeking Alpha where a lot of investors go and you can talk about stocks. And I was writing there anonymously, and he was looking into this company Mallinckrodt that I was criticizing. So he was seeing what people say. And that's one consistent theme I found in my life is writing online is a networking superpower. Now, if you write nonsense, I don't think people will reach out to you. But if you write something really smart, even if only 1,000 people read it, if your email is there, people love to reach out. That is a great way to network. And it's a lot warmer than, say, just randomly getting introduced to somebody. If somebody reads something you write and they think it's smart and they reach out, they already want to talk to you. So it's the best possible world.
Great. So what was the next lucky break that you would say was pivotal for you?
So this is a little bit of a fun story. Um, Freshman year, I finished. I went home for the summer for a little bit. And while I was home, I was talking to a bunch of high school classmates. And one of the girls I was talking to said, I'm a babysitter on this platform called care.com. And I think they're kind of sketchy. You should look into it. And this is what I was passionate about, looking into bad, sketchy companies. And I said, okay, care.com, large babysitting platform, at the time, publicly traded, billion-dollar company. And basically, care.com is a platform where parents can find babysitters and babysitters can advertise their services to parents. And the most important thing for any babysitting platform is safety. You've got to make sure people are who they say they are, make sure they aren't criminals. Parents want that level of trust with the people they hire from the site. And care.com claimed to be running background checks, claimed to be vetting their babysitters. But I saw just from some local news reporting that parents were complaining they hired somebody who had a prior drug arrest or hired somebody who ended up being a criminal and maybe hurting their child. So I was curious to see if the company was doing the background checks they claimed to be doing. So I tried to sign up on care.com as Harvey Weinstein, who was in the news at the time. So I used a photo of Harvey Weinstein. I used the email harveythebabysitter@gmail.com. I made up an address. I made up a social security number. I consented to their background check, and I'm documenting all this. And at the end of this process, to apply to be on care.com, they said, we'll get back to you in 24 to 48 hours. And I thought, there's no way I get approved. This is obviously a fake account. 24 hours later, hello, Harvey, you've been approved. I start applying to babysitting jobs. I make an account as Daffy Duck and Donald Trump. It's clear they're not running the background checks they claim to be doing. I say I'm CPR certified. I get a badge. It's all nonsense. And I figure, like, wow, this is actually problematic. I look into more local news reporting, and I see there's more issues around safety incidents. There's a few lawsuits. So I write up a little story, and at this point, I have a Twitter following because of Mark. And I tweet out this story about care.com, and I say I was able to sign up as Harvey Weinstein. They're not running background checks. They're facilitating a lot of criminal babysitters. And that story goes a little viral. The stock falls, people start reaching out, and the company gets pissed. And nothing would have happened if the company didn't respond. But the company sends a letter to my house and letter to my parents, essentially, because I'm in college. And they call my college to try to get me in trouble. And I think a bunch of board members were Stanford alums, and it somehow reaches the Stanford Dean of Students, who calls me into her office and says, look, we got a complaint about your Wi-Fi usage. You're violating their terms of service while using campus Wi-Fi. Will you take the article down? And I said, absolutely not. And I thought it was so corrupt that I decided to dig in more. And I basically become obsessed with this company. For the next year, all I do is I go to regulators. I start filing FOIA requests for consumer complaints. I'm reading everything. At one point, I go to the NYPD and I send a FOIA request, a government request for all 911 calls that use care.com at any point in the 911 transcript. And I start sending letters to any family that ever called 911. I've just become obsessed with this company. And long story short, I write a little more. I cold email about 100 journalists to tell them about the safety issues I found. The Wall Street Journal gets interested. I meet with Gregory Zuckerman at the Wall Street Journal. And a year or two later, there's a front page story. Care.com babysitters with criminal histories were hired through the site. They killed about 8 kids that they were hired to babysit, and there were tons of safety issues. The CEO, CFO, general counsel all resigned. The stock falls. It ends up sold to another company that improves the safety practices. But it gave me a reputation because for 2 years, I'm on Twitter screaming about this company and safety issues. And everybody's like, he's a young guy, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong, who knows? But then when the Wall Street Journal article comes out, everyone says, oh, he was ahead of the curve here a little, he was right. And that gives me a reputation that ultimately lets me start a newsletter with people caring what I have to say. So when that article came out, that was a total turning point where it's like, you're some weirdo obsessed with this company, to like, wow, how did you predict the news?
I have so many questions to ask. The first is just the how you knew to do things like a FOIA request, to ask for phone records, to, the kinds of questions that you were digging into, because you were not a journalism major, Edwin, which is what people might think. You were an econ major. And how did you find the time to do this while you were a full-time student?
I didn't know exactly what I was doing. And I like to say sometimes when you're young, you don't realize all the risks that you're taking while you're taking them. Because I could have very easily probably gotten sued or kicked out of school. Or there was some risk here that I didn't fully appreciate. I was blind to it. Working at this hedge fund, though, really, really helped me get an edge, because what I did with care.com was separate from interning at Sophos. But being there, I kind of showed that I was learning the groundwork of how to research companies through this internship, which then I could apply in like a personal capacity to care.com. FOIA, I had no idea, except I saw somebody else was FOIA-ing a different agency, and I started learning about that. And I think I called him to ask about what this processes using the Freedom of Information Act to get government records.
You saw somebody else was doing it. Who was the somebody else?
There's a guy, John Gavin, at Probes Reporter, and he has a business catering to hedge funds, including the one I worked at, where he'll send FOIA requests for government records to the SEC on companies. And I think I talked to him at one point to ask him about it. And he's like, yeah, all you do is you find the FOIA officer, you send an email, you use this type of language, and they get back to you in a week or two. So with care.com, I knew their headquarters was in Boston or so. So I go to the Massachusetts Attorney General and I just send an email to this email inbox for these types of requests saying, can I have these records? And I had no idea what I was doing. And to my amazement, 2 weeks later, just in my email inbox, there's a PDF with 300 pages of complaints against care.com. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of complaints. These are serious issues. I'm like, how can I get this? This is like a sorcery. I can just get all these complaints by requesting the right person in government to send them to me. And when you do that, you start doing other states. And I learned that some states don't give them to you. The laws change state by state. It's a little bit of experimenting, and not everything I try to do ended up being fruitful. But when it's the same thing reaching out to journalists. I didn't know exactly what to say, but once you start reaching out to 10, you'll notice, well, 5 respond to this type of email, and 5, short is good, catchy subject lines are good, and you just cold email 100, eventually somebody is going to get back to you. So it was very much trial and error. Having this internship helped me learn the ropes, but I a little bit of luck too.
Looking in the rear view mirror, it's pretty clear how the dots start lining up. Would you agree?
Absolutely. But I had no clue at the time. I mean, a friend tells me in a car ride to look at care.com. If that never happened, I would have never looked at the company. I experiment with Harvey Weinstein because he's in the news, and then that's comical. If the dean of students didn't harass me over it, I probably would have dropped it. If I didn't reach out to that one reporter who cared, it probably would have gone nowhere. If I didn't meet Marco, if my high school principal never introduced me to the investor near my school, I would have never got the intro to this other college student who introduced me to Mark. I would have never had the passion. I wouldn't have, there is like a 1 in a trillion chance all these stars aligned to really give me this unique footing to launch a newsletter.
But don't you think, I'm going to push back there,
Yeah.
because I think you're the kind of person who will make luck happen wherever you go because of certain attributes that you have and certain actions that you took. And I want to talk about that in a minute.
Yes.
But first, when does the Wall Street Journal article get published?
So it's my junior year. It was winter quarter while I was in Stanford in New York. So this is 2019, I think. I remember more where it was in my college time. So this is like a year or so before maybe a year and a half before I start the bear cave. And I got a
Yes.
little mention in it. So it like really gave me credibility.
And how many Twitter followers are you up to at this point?
I think at this point I'm probably in the 5 to 10,000 range, and I'm really starting to get noticed by people. People might not they'll know of me or heard of me, or it's just the Twitter stuff is making it really easy to meet people because now they've seen me tweeting about this company for a year, and it's like, oh wow, he was right, and then the DMs start flowing. And I always made it so my profile had my email and had open DMs, and that makes you very accessible, so it's easier to meet with people.
So, what inspired you to start the Bear Cave, which you launched in February of 2020? And how did it evolve from a hobby into a lucrative business?
So it started with an unlucky break, actually. I had interned at this fund Sophos all 4 years of college, and I kind of figured I would work for them when I was graduating. And I was really excited to go work for them and work for my amazing boss and the team there. And I was kind of stunned when they couldn't hire me because they were kind of in the process of winding down, or the boss was thinking of retiring in the next few years, and I was devastated. So I didn't have a job, and I'm a senior, and I think I'm smart, but I don't have a job. So I started talking to New York hedge funds, but it's very hierarchical. I couldn't find somebody I loved as much as my first boss, Jim Carruthers. And I'm like, shoot, I got to get a job. So it's February 2020, senior year, graduation's approaching in 4 months. And I say, the thing that's consistently worked for me in the past is writing online with Malincrot, with care.com. I'm going to start a newsletter, and I'm going to just start writing online. People will see maybe I'm smart and someone will want to hire me. So I start the newsletter in February 2020 as a way to get a job. Then the pandemic hits 4 weeks later. So I go home, everyone goes home, and I have a lot of free time, and I'm putting it all into this newsletter because it's starting to get traction. The pandemic was a really lucky break because in the pandemic, everybody was online, everybody was on Twitter, everyone was looking for something to read. It was a once in a generation opportunity to launch a newsletter and have a huge base of readership. People were signing up. The newsletter is really just me. Originally, it was me just talking about what's going on in the short world, summarizing other people's ideas, linking to interesting tweets, linking to interesting news articles. And I was just doing that every week, and it's getting traction. And slowly people are interested in maybe hiring me because of it. But somebody said, you should really charge for this. The audience has money. They're mainly Wall Street people. And I said, okay. So I decided to launch a paid tier and see how it goes. And I remember the day I launched the paid tier, I think I got $2,000 in annual revenue signups, which was nothing. I was devastated. I thought, oh my gosh, I am so screwed. Like, even if I double it or triple it, it's not going to work. But by the end of 6 weeks, after I start writing more on individual companies and that gets traction, I think 6 weeks in, it was 100K in annual recurring revenue, which is enough for, a student to live on, or young guy to live on. So it just really took off. And from there, it's been my only job ever since.
Can you discuss or share a particularly impactful investigation that you've covered in the Bear Cave? And if there were any serendipitous events or lucky breaks that happened around it?
With the bear cave, I don't know if there was one big turning point rather than a lot of small ones. There was an institutional investor profile, there was gaining Twitter, the pandemic was a beautiful time. Because there was a lot of COVID checks going out, all these individuals are getting extra thousands of dollars to have, and a lot of them were pouring it in the stock market and speculating, which led to a lot of bad companies soaring up. So I had a lot of low-hanging fruit on types of companies I could expose. One early investigation that really helped was called The Joint. They were a franchisor of chiropractic clinics, and they were growing really fast. And the stock had gone from 10 to like 100. And investors loved them, 50 times earnings. Everyone thought this company is going to be huge. And I just go online and I see there's a lot of consumer complaints. And I do similar to what I do with care.com, which is more or less my secret sauce. And what I'm good at is FOIA requests to state regulators. I start going to all these state regulators, getting hundreds of pages of complaints. And I see that a lot of the reason they're doing so well financially is they're secretly auto-enrolling people in a monthly recurring program. So you go in for one chiropractic adjustment thinking it's going to be $20, and then they secretly sign you up for a $40 a month program so you can come in at limited times, but you don't know it and you're not consenting to it. And then they made it really tough to cancel. So a lot of people, the reason they're doing well is they're just being billed without their consent, and I have the documents to show it. I see insiders are selling a lot of stock. I see the franchisees that themselves are not that healthy and shutting down. And while the market thinks this company's on the up and up, I know it's going to start suffering. So I write 2 articles on them. One of the largest shareholders says, Edwin's totally wrong. Let's do a debate. I have a public debate on Twitter arguing with them. He's saying, you're a kid, you're talking about, and similar to care.com. I'm like,
Oh,
no,
he
this is all
really
the.
did that? He
Yeah,
threw
yeah.
the kid card on the table?
He was a professor. He was in addition to being an investor, this guy was a professor at a university, and he's like, "You're making the same mistake I see my students make. You don't know what you're talking." But he was somewhat respectful, but there was definitely a little bit talking down. And I think, and I was right. The stock ended up falling 90%. Literally the day I published one of my reports, it fell 20%. I got the peak perfectly. And not only was I right, but when you put yourself out there, when you have the debate, when you write about it a lot, and then it plays out as you expected, you seem to get, I think, a lot of credibility. So one of my strengths is when I think I'm right, I want to court as much controversy as possible. I'm always asking people to debate me, and I think it ends up working. So that just gave me credibility. Those 1 or 2 early wins, similar with care.com, gave it credibility where people are like, I want to pay to see what Edwin has to say. I want to see the companies he's going to be writing about.
So would you say that your newsletter has moved the market over the last 4.5 years?
Absolutely. Maybe not the total stock market, but for the companies I write about, I have a strict schedule where I always publish on the first and third Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And now, there's about 65,000 people who read it. They kind of are expecting it. And whenever I write on a stock, just instantly it like spikes down a little, which is humbling, but also a little scary. And then it also provides an incentive where people will say, tell me, before you publish that. I'm like, no, absolutely not. I think at one point people were monitoring my Twitter to see which tweets I was liking to try to guess which companies I'd write on. So then I needed stop being so public with my Twitter usage. It definitely has become a little bit of a thing, and it's hot now. And the scary thing is when you're hot, you're afraid, what if I get less hot in the future? But for now, it definitely is moving stocks, and I think carries a lot of weight. The other unique aspect is I don't bet against the companies I write about. I only make money from reader subscriptions, which some people criticize, but I think lends a lot of credibility and makes people who are influential say, at least Edwin's being honest and doesn't have an incentive to exaggerate.
Are they criticizing you because they're saying you don't have skin in the game? Is that what?
Precisely.
Where they're
That if
coming
you
from?
think this company is doing so badly, you should be betting against it. Why would I bet against it if you're not betting against it yourself? Of course, the moment you do bet against it, the same people might say, well, you're conflicted, you're biased, you're just trying to move your position, you're just talking your book. There's no way to win. But
Yeah, absolutely. Edwin, you have always, I would say, going back to certainly when you started college, taken an unconventional path to job seeking and career building. And
mhm.
I know that you feel strongly that college students should explore opportunities off the beaten track, off the beaten path. What advice do you have to help them do that? Could you give us an example of how they could do that around, let's say, if there's a company that they'd really like to work for? What would you recommend they do?
Well, if you're a college student and there's a company you really want to work for, you obviously want to do your research. You want to know everything you can about that company. You want to know maybe what position you'd really like. And then what I love to do in college is I go to the LinkedIn page for the company And on LinkedIn, you can see people from your school who work at the company. And if it's a big company, there's going to be 30 or 40 people at least from your school who work at that company. And from there, you can reach out to them directly on LinkedIn. You might be able to find their email in an alumni database. You might be able to find their email elsewhere. And people generally love helping students, and they love helping people from their school. I don't know if it's completely rational, but everybody loves helping the kid from their school because they can envision themselves in that situation. They can get up on the school gossip. So if I wanted to get an internship at a place, I would go, I'd see everybody from my school who works there. My college had a good alumni database, so you could find alumni emails. Otherwise, DM them on LinkedIn and just start asking them. Sometimes there's the Pitbull quote: ask for money, get advice; ask for advice, get money twice. I have found that when you just go asking for advice and you want to learn, sometimes one person will really connect with you and try to open up a door. You can, maybe somebody will want to hire you directly. That's one good way to get the ball rolling. I also feel that the time to network is when you don't need anything. When you need the internship, it might be a little too late, but versus when it's before you need the internship and they can see you're not even reaching out for the internship. Because if you're reaching out right before internship season, they'll be like, I know what this kid wants. But if you're reaching out just trying to learn when you have a different internship and this is my ideal company, then that's the perfect time to network because it's genuine. People want to help. You can build relationships that way. So the time to network and meet people is when you don't need anything.
When you say they should ask those alumni for advice, you went with information
Yeah.
that you thought would be interesting to him. How can a student model that and go to the person, the alumni at the company where they want to work with information that might be interesting and useful to that person?
So I think it could sometimes be a little tough because if you're young and you're new to an industry and you're meeting with somebody who has 30 years of experience there, I'm not completely sure you're going to be able to blow their socks off and super help. I think the bare minimum you can do is do a lot of research on them and come in with a list of questions and show you're not going to waste your time and show you put a lot of thought and care. I think people can really sense whether you've put time and energy into researching them to have a good list of questions and really make the most out of their 20 minutes, because every successful person has tons of people vying for their time and tons of people who waste their time. And you don't want to do that. And I think the bar is so low for students where they go to a meeting and they say, oh, well, can you tell me about your job? And, they don't have a list of questions where if you say, look, why did you do this in your career? Why did you change this? What do you think of this industry thing? What advice do you have for me considering this company versus this company? If you just go in with a lot of time, I think even going out with an index card full of questions or like even a printed out piece of paper, I'm not a fan of having it on your phone and reading from your phone. I think that can help. And then the other thing, this mental trick I would play when I would try to meet with people in college is, I had an edge where I could talk about care.com or whatever company. But the biggest thing I would tell myself is pretend like you're meeting the president. So when if you were to meet the president, you would never be late. You wouldn't go in with a cup of coffee in your hand or a hat on. You wouldn't go in unprepared. You wouldn't go in and say, I'm having an okay day. You would go in, you'd be extremely energetic, you'd be early, you'd be on time, you'd be sharp, you'd look good. If you treat everybody like they're the president and you're meeting the president, then that really helps. And it's easy to say, be respectful and be early, but just think of it just like you are meeting the president. Every single person, it's like you're meeting the president of the United States. And I just think that works magic in terms of really networking when you're young.
Yeah, magic is good. I have found in my life
Yes.
listening to my gut, to my intuition, has for sure increased my luck surface area.
Yes.
I think that there are certain attributes and certain actions that you have taken, networking for sure,
Yeah.
to increase your luck surface area. What would you say are some of the other strategies that you've put into place, Edwin, that you think has definitely kind of 2x, 4x, 10x your luck?
So I love that question. Um, Reaching out to tons of people, tons of cold email, every meeting, any conference I can go to, I try to go to that. Writing online, huge superpower. Tweeting a lot, big superpower. Anytime I'd go to a new city, I would tweet, hey, I'm a college student, passionate about this. I'm going to be in the city from this day to this day. Here's my email. Having people reach out to you, perfect, because then you get 5 people who genuinely want to meet with you, and you can meet people that way. uh, I I don't, in addition to the Bear Cave, I started this other newsletter called Idea Brunch, where I do written interviews with young, up and coming, off the beaten path investors who I like. And in addition to being able to charge for the interviews and earning money from the subscription revenue, it's a networking superpower. People love to be interviewed. So when you're just the benefit from that is, I kind of joke that if you call up a really successful person and you say, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time to ask you a bunch of questions? They'll say, I'm busy. No. If you say, hey, I have this little publication where I interview people. Can I do a professional interview with you for 15 minutes and ask the same question? They'll say, absolutely. I love being interviewed. So, and then it's like you're doing them a favor. So, that helped, having an internet presence, Twitter, being very, very open to meeting with people. Someone DMs me and says, look, I'm in New York for a day. Do you want to grab a coffee? I'm almost always going to try to do it if the schedule permits. I really don't, have too much of a bar in terms of who I want. Like, you need to be this successful to meet. I want to be as accessible as possible. And I'm trying to think if there's, I think also there's a genuine aspect to life where I kind of fear, I think more and more people become faceless and just need to fit a mold and want to be who you don't want to stand out in any way. You don't want to have any flaws. Elon Musk says a lot of CEOs kind of talk like Sims characters with the chatbot of 4 appropriate answers for any question. I think being the opposite and being truly genuine in all your meetings and interaction is another way to open up doors. Even if you might rub somebody the wrong way, you always want to be polite. You always want to be respectful. But if you're genuine, you show opinions, you take unpopular views, I think that's another way to open up a lot of doors.
I have 2 final questions, Edwin, that I try to ask all my guests. The first is somewhat similar to the luck surface area.
Yes.
What can our audience do right now to become more magical, more serendipitous in their lives?
So this. If I was a college student or a young person interested in a field, I think starting a podcast interview series is a literal thing that will open up so many doors. If you just start a podcast and start interviewing people, like I said earlier, you call someone, say, can I ask you questions? They say, no, can you come on my podcast? People will love that. They feel like you're doing them a favor. They will have a special interest in you. They'll try to open up doors for you. If I was young in college, interested in a field, start a podcast or interview series about the subject matter I'm passionate about. And I think the doors will open like crazy. I think just being present, being nice, just being an honest person is the best way to go about life. Having an internet presence, cold emailing a lot. Just I try to get in the habit, even if I just see something I like, I might not even try to meet with the person. Just send an email and say, look, I really like what you wrote. Just wanted to say I thought this was really smart. And even if you doing nice things when you don't want anything in return, that it just opens up all these doors. And some people might take an interest in you that way. Once you get in the habit of just breaking out of your comfort zone a little, approaching somebody who gives a cool talk, cold emailing somebody who wrote something that's interesting, cold emailing your favorite podcast host to just say you like it, I think you'll be amazed at how often people respond. And there's another saying I like, which is if you're driving on the road and you see somebody on the side of the road with a car that's broken down and they're waving for help, a lot of people drive by. But if you see somebody with the car on the side of the road and they're pushing their car and just trying to push it forward, everybody will stop and help and push the car. So sometimes the best way to get other people to help you is to show that you're trying to help yourself and taking the first steps.
Oh, that's wonderful advice. Now, looking back on your career journey so far, what would you say, Edwin, has been the secret to the serendipity, the luck, and the magic that you've experienced so far?
So we've talked about a bunch of it. I think being online, writing online is very good. Twitter is very good. Being able to cold email a lot. I would literally, when I was in New York for a quarter in college, I think I'd cold email 100 people a week, just trying to meet as many people as I could. So being hardworking, pushing that, knowing the subject matter is really important. And I had a feeling that you were going to ask me this question towards the end. So if it's okay, I'd like to read a quote that was really impactful to me.
Totally.
Okay, this is from the Supreme Court Justice Chief Roberts. He gave it a 2017 commencement speech, and it touched on luck. And I'll read a paragraph from it here that really impacted me. He said at the end, now commencement speakers will typically also wish you good luck and extend good wishes to you. I will not do that, and I'll tell you why. From time to time in the years to come, I hope you'll be treated unfairly, so you'll come to know the value of justice. I hope you will suffer betrayal, because that'll teach you the importance of loyalty. Sorry to say, but I hope you'll be lonely from time to time, so you don't take friends for granted. I wish you bad luck again from time to time, so you'll be conscious of the role chance plays in life and understand your success is not completely deserved and the failure of others is not completely deserved either. And when you lose, as you will from time to time, I hope every now and then your opponent will gloat over your failure. It is a way for you to understand the importance of sportsmanship. I hope you'll be ignored so you know the importance of listening to others. And I hope you'll have just enough pain to learn compassion. And so in some ways, I think it's talking about, the luckiest thing in life can be getting unlucky, being betrayed, being hurt, and being able to just learn from it and bounce back stronger. So there's one thing I think that's really opened up everything for me. It's never getting beaten down and killed by a bad relationship with somebody or a bad internship or you just treat it as a learning experience and you move on and you become invincible. And the bad luck is my greatest luck.
Or having the dean of your university, was it the dean who tried to pressure you to take your article
yes.
off the internet, right?
Yes.
If that hadn't happened,
none of this. And if I listened to them, none of this would have happened.
Exactly. Edwin, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your incredible wisdom and experience that you've had to date. And I hope our audience will subscribe. They can get a free subscription.
Absolutely.
Or they can pay to subscribe to the Bear Cave. We'll have all the details in the description. And I want to wish you many, many more magical moments to come.
Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Let's go.
Thanks so much for tuning into another episode of This Magic Life. Our mission is to inspire you to stop fearing your future and start getting excited about all the serendipitous and magical opportunities that await you. Make sure to subscribe to This Magic Life on YouTube so you don't miss any new episodes. And for on-the-go listening, give us a follow wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. We absolutely love to get feedback from the This Magic Life community, so make sure to drop us a comment on YouTube or a 5-star review on Apple. And you can always find me on LinkedIn at Andrea Koppel, aka the Career Magic Maker. I can't wait to see you soon.